The following program is sponsored by Community Psychiatric Centers and is produced for educational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for medical or psychological advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The content should not be used for self-diagnosis or treatment of any health-related condition. As always, seek the advice of your healthcare provider with any questions regarding a medical or mental health condition.
Welcome to Community Psychiatric Centers Presents. Tonight, dealing with a spoiled child. It can definitely be one of parenting's challenging events. And once a child is spoiled, is there any way to reverse their behavior to, in a sense, unspoil them? Tonight, we'll get advice from our experts. Dr. John Carasso is Clinical Director of Community Psychiatric Centers. He's a clinical licensed child psychologist and a certified school psychologist. And Dr. Robert Lowenstein is Medical Director of Community Psychiatric Centers. He's a board-certified child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist and a fellow of the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Dr. Lowenstein, we've all seen kids who we think may be a bit spoiled, but what does spoiled really mean, and how do these children generally act?
Right. Well, when you think of the word spoiled child, you think of a child who has an enormous amount of toys, very expensive toys, and but that's not spoiled child. Our spoiled child really talks about the behavior that a child tends to demonstrate. Children that are spoiled tend to be very demanding, very self-centered, and have unreasonable expectations for what their parents should give them. These are children who feel entitled to get whatever they want, to tend to whine and cry, to manipulate their parents to get them what they want, and to always be tending to butt their head against the wall because they always feel unfulfilled in some way. As they grow older, they have a lot of trouble because they have trouble sharing with other children. They have trouble in their ability to wait their turn. They also don't appreciate why they can't get what they want immediately. And it creates social problems for them and other peers and siblings, and when they become adults, they become spoiled adults in which life doesn't do them good turns.
Dr. Carasso, we've obviously all seen spoiled children, but what is it that causes them to be that way?
It's kind of a shame because, many parents, their heart is in the right place. They want their child to be happy. They want to give them things. They want to see smiles on their kids' face, and they want to share those special moments with their kids. Unfortunately, some parents take this sentiment a bit too far. They have trouble setting limits. They give their child whatever they want, whenever they want to, or whenever they want it. And then that's the beginnings of creating a spoiled child. Some parents, however, they have trouble setting limits. They have trouble knowing what to do and how to do it. And so they need help just with the whole discipline aspect of parenting. There's a growing sense, it seems, within the community of parents wanting their kids to like them. Not recognizing that ultimately overindulging their child results in really just the opposite, the child having no respect or very little respect for their parent, and oftentimes not liking them. Overindulging children tends to create increased behavior problems and bickering and arguments and conflicts. What kids want and what kids need and what kids appreciate and what kids then ultimately return to their parents with more love and affection is strong and firm boundaries and limits that are reasonable and fair. That's what works.
So when they think they're going to make a child their friend, they're really doing the opposite.
Yeah. That's what we see. We see increased arguments and bickering and conflicts, and then they seek treatment, which is really a good thing because it can be turned around.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Lowenstein, how does a parent know whether or not their own child is spoiled? Because everyone might think it's someone else's child, and it's hard to see what's happening.
Yeah. Well, first thing, parents often come to us with a sense of frustration. They feel like their child is always unhappy. They feel as if their child is always crying and whining. Some things occur in the child's life which tend to make them think their child is spoiled. For example, is the child overindulged, meaning do they want a second Barbie doll even though they have a perfectly good one at home? But they see another one in the store, and two is better than one, and they must have that. Do they demand center stage when they're playing with their friends, meaning do they need to be the leader of the group. Everyone has to do what they want. Everyone has to play what they want to play and choose the kinds of things they want to choose, and they have to win at games. Other things to look for is, do they have trouble in being able to delay their gratification, meaning they want a cookie at the bakery, and the mother says, well, we have to wait our turn, or you have to wait until somebody calls upon us, and the child simply cannot wait. They have to have it immediately. They have a sense that they are entitled and to get what they want immediately. The other thing to look at is sometimes parents are not able to set expectations on their child, meaning the child has to, for example, clean their bedroom, or and they just don't carry through on that task or that chore, and the parent tends to overlook it, so the child gets away with not doing those things which they should be doing, which would also help their self-esteem, being able to complete it. But they try to get out of it, basically.
And if they don't get help at the right time, adult life can be very tough.
Exactly. Yes.
All right, we'll come back and we'll tell you what you can do if you have or know of someone who has a spoiled child. You're watching Community Psychiatric Centers Presents on PCNC.
Is your child defiant at home?
Do teachers say your child refuses to behave?
If this sounds familiar and your family is in crisis, we can help. I'm Dr. Robert Lowenstein.
And I'm Dr. John Carasso.
At Community Psychiatric Centers, we make it our mission to quickly and effectively diagnose and treat your child so your family doesn't have to spend months on a waiting list.
Call us today for a free phone consultation. An early diagnosis and proper treatment can make a world of difference in your child's life.
Tickets for the 2008 NAACP Human Rights Dinner are going fast. Dr. Alex Johnson, the new president of Community College of Allegheny County, will be the featured speaker. Call 412-471-1024 to reserve your space for this year's annual event, May 8th at the Pittsburgh Hilton.
The Pennsylvania Resources Council has been promoting conservation and environmental protection since 1939. Join us in protecting your environment. Learn more at prc.org.
Welcome back to Community Psychiatric Centers Presents. We're talking with Dr. Robert Lowenstein and Dr. John Carasso of Community Psychiatric Centers tonight about the spoiled child. And Dr. Lowenstein, what can parents do if they have a spoiled child? Where do they start?
Well, there's a lot of things to do to unspoil a child or to prevent a child from being spoiled. We have we have some tapes that I wanted to go over in terms of ways in which to create a spoiled child. If you think of it in reverse, if a parent really wants to make a child spoiled, here are the things to do to make the child spoiled. And one of them is to make the child the center of your world, meaning whatever the child wants, the child gets. The child's happiness is more important than the reality. If they want that second doll that's in the store, when they already have one, I mentioned before, they get it anyway. Don't reinforce positive behaviors, meaning the child is acting perfectly well, they're playing nicely, they're not bothering anybody. The child needs to be reinforced that they're doing a good job. Correlated to that is to reward some behavior which should not be rewarded. For example, only give the child attention when they whine and cry and have a temper tantrum and want something from you, and then you give them attention for that. Fail to set clear limits. This is the most important thing. Children need to know what the expectations are, what the rules are, and they need to be abided by. Do not enforce rules consistently. This is also very important. Parents often do this. They'll say, no, you need to be home by 7 o'clock at night to a teenager. One night they enforce it, the next night they're lax. The child gets to feel that really the rules don't seem to matter. Or pick fights you cannot win. Very important not to do this, meaning parents need to pick their battles. Don't fight with a child over something you can't win. Like, for example, forcing a child to eat their broccoli or their asparagus if they don't like it. The child simply won't do it. They'll purse their lips. They'll spit it out. It's not worth fighting over. It's only important to fight over things that are important. Do not hold your child accountable, meaning if a child does something they shouldn't do, it's very important to make them accountable for what they've done and to have some kind of negative consequence. If not, the child becomes rude and uncooperative and disrespectful to you, no doubt. Give gifts for the wrong reasons. If the child whines, cries, tries to manipulate you, says you're the worst mommy in the world, my girlfriend's mommy gave me, don't give in to that. Give in, and gifts should only be given for positive reasons because the child has earned it. Give in to temper tantrums, same thing. Doesn't matter how bad the temper tantrum is, it should never be given into as a source of control for that child. And lastly, don't act like a spoiled child yourself. We see a lot of adults who whine and complain and cry and try to manipulate their children into giving them what they want because they're in pain and suffering, and obviously that's a poor role model. Don't do those things and you won't have a spoiled child.
So that is the prescription for a spoiled child.
Yes,
I've never seen, that's a great 10-step recipe not to repeat. But Dr. Grasso, so you've got a child who's spoiled. What do you do then? Is it possible to reverse the trend, and how hard is it?
Well, it can be a challenge depending upon how long it has gone on for and how severe the spoiling, quote-unquote, has been. The most important point is to, as Dr. Lowenstein mentioned, to develop a plan. This, however, can be no easy task at times. It can be a challenge. So it's important for parents, if we invite them to give us a call, we can talk about options. And parents need to agree on that plan and use it together. They need to present the plan to the child in no uncertain terms, no nonsense type of thing, and then follow through. And that, of course, is the hard part, especially for these parents who have a tendency to have difficulty tolerating their child's emotion. They have a hard time with that, and that compels them to give in. Keeping in mind, it's never too late. Never too late. And even if their child is an adult child, establishing those proper boundaries is a good thing, and it's never too late to start doing that.
Very interesting. Dr. Lowenstein, what about some other suggestions to try to unspoil the spoiled child?
Well, I think what Dr. Rosso just said is very important, and I just want to emphasize it again. It's important when you want to turn things around to announce it to the child. Now, the important thing also is to announce it as a joint front, meaning if you have a spouse, you and your spouse together sit down with the child and say, okay, new day, new rules, we're starting fresh. This is how we expect you to behave in these situations, and this is what's going to happen positively when you do and not so positively when you don't. And keeping a united front is very important, because if the spouse or the boyfriend or the grandparents or the aunts and uncles aren't in line with adhering to the same rules, and of course the child wins. Very important how you speak to the child, not angrily, firm but kind tone of voice. Avoid raising your voice and screaming at the child, and always follow through with the consequences. It's very important to be consistent with that.
Dr. Crosser, what are some other things parents should consider?
Well, not to be the bearer of bad news, but keep in mind that it will get worse before it gets better. This is going to throw the child off. They won't understand, but they will think, all right, you want to play games? Well, we'll see what you got, and they're going to up the ante, and they're going to tantrum worse before they get the message. And so hang in there, be firm, be consistent, and keep working together as a team. Parents can give themselves the time out if they need to, just to calm down and relax and realize that, okay, I got to hang in there, and I have to remind myself that ultimately this is for my best and for the child's best, and to help the family work more cohesively and be a family and be a team. We're all going to be better off if I hang in there.
Do kids have this innate sense of divide and conquer? Let me go after the weaker parent and see if I can get them to fold first.
Yeah, and they learn that from early on. I mean, they learn how to look pitiful and have tears in their eyes, and make the parents feel guilty for not giving them what they want because they're suffering so much.
All right. What if a child has a tantrum in a store? That can be especially tough because the parent, doesn't want this seen, and there it is for the world to see.
Well, yeah, kids tend to choose the worst possible places to have temper tantrums, the places that embarrass the parent or cause as much of a ruckus as they can, stores being one of them. Obviously, it's important to have a plan ahead of time to know how you're going to handle these temper tantrums. Sometimes it's important to sit down with the child ahead of time and say, now, here's what's going to happen. We're going to go to the store, we're going to buy this or that. If you can't get something that you want, I don't expect you to have a temper tantrum. We can have a discussion about it, and if things get really bad, I'm going to take you out of the store so that you can calm down. If you keep to that game plan, things work out pretty well.
What if a child wants a parent's attention when they are on the phone?
Yeah,
You hear so many parents struggling with that
Well,
because
tough.
they're
That's tough.
getting pulled on the arm.
We talked about delayed gratification. These kids tend not to have that, and so the idea of waiting to get what they want until the parent hangs up the phone, that's a no-go. However, keeping in mind that if a parent is a parent of, say, a 3-year-old and the parent's on the phone for an hour, well, that's a long time, and that's a long time to expect the child to wait. And so we have to keep proper expectations. But a few pointers. One would be is that the parent needs to provide lots of reinforcement for the child does keep it together. They need to have a game plan ahead of time, which could include hanging up that phone, putting that child in timeout, and dealing with the issue at hand. Parent may also want to have a fake phone call, just pretend, so they can deal with it. And again, and not have to worry about hanging up on somebody. But the idea is to follow through and not put up with it and have clear expectations. This is not acceptable.
So setting limits. All right,
Exactly.
We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll talk to our doctors about some other solutions for the spoiled child problem right after this. You're watching Community Psychiatric Centers Presents on PCNC.
Do you have a child, adolescent, or teenager who is having trouble at home, in the community, or at school? Call Community Psychiatric Centers for help.
I work as a licensed psychologist and certified school psychologist. My partner, Dr. Lowenstein, he's a board-certified child psychiatrist. Together, along with our professional staff at CPC, we are prepared to meet any family mental health need when they need it most.
When a child is in crisis, when a child is suffering, when a child is in pain, a family is in pain and a family suffers. And our goal is to relieve that pain and find the child where they are and help the family to heal. And that's the basis of our program, is to help families to heal.
For a free phone consultation, call Community Psychiatric Centers today at 1-877-899-6500 and watch Community Psychiatric Centers Presents Wednesdays at 7:30 on PCNC. Community Psychiatric Centers, connecting you, your community, your world, one family at a time.
Welcome back to Community Psychiatric Centers Presents. We're talking with Dr. John Carasso and Dr. Robert Lowenstein of Community Psychiatric Centers about the spoiled child tonight and how we can reverse or prevent a child from becoming spoiled. And Dr. Lowenstein, what can we do if a parent is with a child in the car and the child starts throwing a tantrum? Because not only is it unpleasant, it could be dangerous.
Right, well, cars are probably the second worst place for them to have temper tantrums, stores being the first, I guess, because they're enclosed spaces, and the whole family is confined in a space where the child's tantruming and yelling and screaming can be quite upsetting to the whole family, and as you said, it can be a danger for the driver. Thing to do is, again, prepare in advance, talk to the children in advance in terms of what the expectations are, make sure that the expectations are clear, provide ample experiences and activities for the child or children to experience while they're riding in the car so that they can be kept occupied, take some time out so that they have a chance to stretch and maybe get some fresh air in between. If a tantrum occurs, a counting regimen could maybe help, meaning, I'll give you 10 to calm down. If going to a fun place, you can turn the car around and say, if you don't calm down, we're simply going to turn the car around and go home and do it, if that's what you threat and that is going to happen. Once there, if the children has a temper tantrum or on the way there, you can ask the child to sit out on some of the games or some of the activities the other children are enjoying to give them the idea that there is a consequence for their bad behavior, and offer some positive rewards when they do well, so that there's a positive incentive to do well and not have temper tantrums as well.
All right, to this point we've been talking about what happens with the parent and the so-called spoiled child, but what about if that child is going to grandparents' house and the grandparent says little Bobby or Susie is the apple of their eye and they're going to get everything they want? What happens?
There's no if. It's when, because that's what happens. The important point of this is that that's what grandparents do. That's expected. This is what they're going to do. Grandparents spoil their grandkids, and that's fully, almost acceptable in many respects. And so parents need to understand that. Now, it does get to be a really significant challenge if that grandparent happens to live in the same home with the parents and the child. It really can be difficult for that reason. It's pretty self-evident. However, the same rules apply, though. The idea is having fun and accept the spoiling and accept the extra candy and whatnot. It's just part of the whole deal. However, we are going to set clear expectations for respect. You're going to respect your grandparents. You're going to mind your manners and have very clear expectations before they get out of the car coming back home. Because that's the challenge. They're being spoiled and they come back home and they have a hard time adjusting to coming back home to the normal limits. So you want to set clear boundaries ahead of time before they even get back in the house, back in their parents' house. Lots of reinforcement for doing well, and maybe some downtime before you get back into the regimen. So you may not want to have them come directly home from grandparents and say, okay, get on your homework and start doing chores. You may want to have some downtime to adjust, to give them more time to adjust.
How do you teach respect? Because we talk about how, we would have possibly treated our grandparents. It seems a little bit tougher for kids to get that message today.
No, limit setting is what it's all about. It really is. If you set proper limits, because we talk about us and how we grew up, well, we would have faced certain consequences had we behaved in a certain way. Same thing holds true today.
All right. Speaking of all the different parenting styles we've been talking about between maybe grandparents and parents, and you talked a little bit about this earlier, what if mom and dad just really don't agree on how you're going to raise the kids?
Yeah, it's a significant problem, and often this is very counterproductive. We see this a lot in parents who are not only together, but parents that are divorced or separated, where the child goes to the father's house on weekends or to the mother's house on weekends and then back to the other house. We also see it between grandparents and parents who have different parenting styles, and this becomes a nightmare basically, because the child in the end tends to rule the roost. If they get whatever they want wherever they go, then they tend to have a false sense of power over adults. They tend to feel as if the only way they can get things they want is by trying to manipulate adults, rather than working for it and feeling a sense of accomplishment and pride that they're getting something positive for good behavior or for some accomplishment. It's very important for parents, grandparents, all those involved to be on the same page and to treat that child the same way wherever they are.
All right, let's go to an email question. This was sent in to cpcwecare.com. My 8-year-old tantrums every time I ask him to help clean up the house. He seems to think that if he did not make the mess, then he should not have to clean it up. What do you suggest?
Well, take comfort in knowing you're not alone. I've never worked with a child or come to my house, and you'll see for yourself that if they didn't make the mess, I ain't cleaning it up. And so it really is a challenge. And so, speaking of cleaning up the whole house, as is posed in the email, it may be helpful to break the task down into small pieces. You start in this little corner of the room and clean this up. It may be even helpful for the parent to get the child started in the process, and that tends to be a helpful thing. Lots of praise, lots of reinforcement. That can be a good thing as well.
Yeah. It's also very important to set the limits or the expectations of ones that the child can accomplish or complete within a short period of time. I mean, you don't want to overburden the child with tasks that they can't complete and they fail at. On the other hand, it's very important that all children have certain basic tasks and chores that they know they're responsible for and that they get positive reinforcement for completing.
All right, we're going to take a short break. We'll be back with more of your email questions right after this. Again, if you have a question, go to cpcwecare.com. If you'd like to reach the doctors, 1-877-899-6500. We'll be right back.
Is your child defiant at home?
Do teachers say your child refuses to behave?
If this sounds familiar and your family is in crisis, we can help. I'm Dr. Robert Lowenstein.
And I'm Dr. John Carasso.
At Community Psychiatric Centers, we make it our mission to quickly and effectively diagnose and treat your child so your family doesn't have to spend months on a waiting list.
Call us today for a free phone consultation. An early diagnosis and proper treatment can make a world of difference in your child's life.
From where I was sitting as a U.S. Army soldier, I knew I had to go where I was told, when I was told. From where my family was sitting, they knew I had to go too. I also knew that while most soldiers physically come home from war, some never return emotionally. The challenges of healing the visible wounds of war can be a daily struggle. But help is available through the National Veterans Foundation Lifeline, dedicated to helping veterans and their families find solutions. Time may not heal all wounds, but from where I'm sitting today, I know the National Veterans Foundation can help.
Welcome back to Community Psychiatric Centers Presents. Let's go now to a few more emails from you, our viewers. Here's one. My 6-year-old is still throwing tantrums. Shouldn't he be past that by now? What should I do?
Yeah, it should be past it by now. Kids should be demonstrating pretty consistent self-control by at least 4 years of age. And so the fact that that's not happening here, again, not that some kids won't throw tantrums every now and then, but again, if it's a consistent problem, then we want to take a look at what is happening during the tantrums. Are they somehow being reinforced? And that can happen in very subtle ways that sometimes parents don't pick up on. But in treatment, we can get a sense of it and get a handle on it to turn it around.
The child that's having these temper tantrums on a daily basis or a very frequent basis is really suffering. I mean, the child suffers when they're constantly in psychic pain, constantly crying and unhappy, and so this really needs to be turned around before the child really becomes unhappy on a chronic basis.
All right. I try to ignore tantrums, but that just makes them worse. What am I doing wrong?
One of the biggest challenges that parents sometimes face is that they will begin ignoring, and they'll ignore it for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and then ultimately they may give in. And that's worse than just giving in immediately, because now you've taught the child, if I hang in there long enough and I keep it up long enough, I'll get what I want. And so that really is a dangerous situation. Now, I'm not sure if that's happening here. It very well could be. But you wonder if at some point this parent might be giving in to the tantrum and then reinforcing the child's lengthier tantrum inadvertently.
And kids can really spot that weakness again.
Yes, they'll take it as long as it takes sometimes, and they'll have temper tantrums for half an hour, 2 hours, whatever it takes. They keep going. After a while, they're out of control, and they no longer sometimes even remember why they started to have a temper tantrum.
All right, let's look at another email. Are tantrums just a kid being spoiled, or are they part of an actual disorder? Very interesting question.
Right. Well, the tantrums are not part of a specific disorder, but there are specific disorders in which tantruming are seen, such as oppositional defiant disorders would be one of them, where a child can temper tantrum when they're not happy, when they're frustrated, and they're not getting what they want.
It's all a matter of how often, how severe, and to what intensity.
So when we see a case of a child, having a tantrum, say in a store, it may not be that it's just a spoiled child, and people jump to that conclusion.
Yes, crying is not always a temper tantrum. I mean, there are times in which a child could be crying because they're frustrated. We see children with autism, for example, they may be crying and having what looks like a temper tantrum, but it's not necessarily because they can't get something that they want. It might be because they're overwhelmed by the situation and they're fearful.
Exactly.
All right, so, and one of the big things is set limits.
Set limits, consistently.
Consistently. All right, doctors, thank you so much for being with us, and thank you for watching. We'll see you next week. Good night.